are down to our last presentation. And it also happens to be last alphabetically, and that is Zibby Media. Zibby Media covers all aspects of the book world, and that includes publishing, operating a physical bookstore, organizing classes and retreats, running an online magazine, and perhaps most famously, producing the hit podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. So let's hear from the host/founder, Zibby Owens, about how that podcast fits within the Zibby Media ecosystem.
That's better. We're making progress here. Yeah, we're in business.
All right.
Inviting me to the podcast Upfronts. I know this is the end of the day, so hang in there. Thank you for welcoming me here. My podcast changed my entire life. I didn't mean to start a podcast. I started it in 2018 at the advice of a girlfriend who was a best-selling author. I love to read and write my entire life. I was trying to sell a book of parenting essays, which I thought of the name Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books for my collection of essays, which I thought was hilarious, but agents did not find it funny. And so I decided to pivot, try to build my platform, and started a podcast. I've been doing it now. I started doing it daily in March of 2020 to be of service to the authors whose books obviously were impacted by the pandemic. And I've done it 7 days a week since then. So I'm going into my 17th season, and each one is 100 episodes. Each one is 30 minutes, all talking to authors. I am a huge book lover. Does anybody here like to read? Yes? Well, I really believe in the importance of books and literature. I know this is a podcast crowd, but I think books are incredibly important and connect and unite us all. I also have built up, I'm part of the ACAST network, and along the way I've also built up an Instagram following, both myself at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, and my audience is super loyal and invested, and they've watched me turn this podcast into a media company, and they've been along the way every step of the way, and it's been really wonderful. I started getting press about what I was doing. After I started the podcast, I moved it in person to an in-person salon in my apartment. Then I started being invited to give presentations at bookstores, and I eventually started a publishing company and a magazine. I do retreats. We have a podcast network and a book club, and then I even opened my own bookstore in Santa Monica. So if anybody goes to California, you have to pop in and visit it, which is really great, and I can do lots of author events there, which makes me very happy. On my podcast, I've had a whole range of people. I've had best-selling authors. For those of you who are big book lovers and like reading books that come out, contemporary novels, and memoirs, and children's books and cookbooks, a lot of those names will be familiar to you. But most of the things on the bestseller list I end up having on my podcast. It might seem like I take every book. I do not take every book, I promise. It takes a lot of time for me to sort through all the pitches, but that's how I could stop at the bookstore, so it ended up working out very well. I also do a lot of celebrities. I was just talking about how if I'm 46 years old, if the 1980s version of me could see the list of people I interviewed, I would die. I just interviewed Andrew McCarthy from St. Elmo's Fire, and like Ralph Macchio, and all these people who as a kid I was just like, are you kidding me? So I have a lot of fun interviewing celebrities, but that's just fun. So one of the things that I've gotten out of podcast life is that I'm able to just be myself. I don't have an act. I wish maybe I did, but I don't. So I just ask people what I want to know about them and their books, they can be a really important person, and I'll be like, so tell me about your decision to go gray. I don't care. I just want to know. And it turns out that a lot of people want to know the same things I want to know. So I've gotten some press over time. It started with Vulture. The LA Times just did a whole big piece about me starting the bookstore in LA. I think LA was very excited to have a piece of the New York literary world out there, and so that's been really rewarding, and it has won a lot of awards, including the Webby Award, and the magazine just won the Webby Award as well, so we're moving and shaking, which is wonderful. In case you advertisers are wondering, my audience is 82% women, well, 54% women ages 35 to 54, but they are a wonderful, dynamic, interesting group. There are just really love my recommendations. People email me all the time. I just posted yesterday about Color Guru, and my friend emails me immediately and was like, "You're such an influencer. I just already bought this." So these are some of the brands that I have worked with in the past, but there are many more as well. I know that Brooklinen is here, and I was, oh yay. Excellent. So here are just a few examples. I realized that my whole life is like using all of the brands, and I posted today on my way here also about even getting ready this morning. But I start my day with Kachava, which was one of my sponsors. Then I put on my Rothy's, which I'm only not wearing because I was trying to be fancy. This is about as fancy as I get these days. Brooklinen. I have, my whole bedding is about Brooklinen. Towels in my daughter's room. I have 4 kids, so I'm all about like having to upgrade things a lot. Olive and June, the kids like to do my nails with that. I'm literally wearing Thrive Cosmetics mascara, which if you do not wear, you have to wear. It never smudges, and it comes out in the shower, and you don't ever have to take it off. It's amazing. Function of Beauty, Bombas, socks, Third Love, bras. I mean, but anyway, Peloton, even Wonderside products. I also, along the way, launched some other podcasts. Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books is my podcast, and then I thought, wouldn't it be funny to do one called Moms Don't Have Time to Have Sex? And so I partnered with a woman named Tracy Cox, who is an international sex expert, and I'm very shy and don't like to talk about it, and she is really open. So we had a very funny dynamic for a while. We actually went viral on TikTok with 1.8 million views of a few of our clips, and this is so embarrassing. I have my older son's friend was like, "Oh hey, I saw you on my For You page, asking about inappropriate stuff," and I was like, "We have to stop this." But anyway, that show is ripe for advertising. Let me tell you, does that have some devoted fans as well? So I decided not to do it anymore. It was getting just too racy, and my kids are getting too old, and I just cannot do the show anymore. So I turned my role over to Kelsey Chittick, who's wonderful, and a former stand-up comic. So the two of them have a fabulous dynamic, and that's called Sex Talk with Tracy and Kelsey, which is part of Zibby Audio, and we had a bunch of other shows. We're sort of scaling back now. So these are our 2 main shows that I wanted to talk to you about, but we do have others. And part of being in the Zibby Media world means not just being able to advertise on the podcast, but with so many other things that we do. We publish 1 book a month, and for every book that we publish, we have a brand partnership. So for example, we had a book come out called Women Are the Fiercest Creatures, and we partnered with Citizens of Humanity, who did a custom tote bag and events and a t-shirt and all of that. We have really interesting opportunities. We're partnering with wine companies and stationery brands and all sorts of things. I have a book club with thousands of members, which meets both in person and virtually, which has sponsorships. We do quarterly retreats with authors all over, which you should come on. They're really, really fun. And they're readers retreats, because there are a lot of other kinds. But what about just getting together and talking about books, which attracts really interesting, smart people. I do sponsored posts, online advertising for Zibby Mag. We have a newsletter sponsorship. Zibby's bookstore, we actually sell products. So for example, Caddis Readers was one of my sponsors on the podcast, which of course I fell in love with, and now we sell them wholesale at our store. So there are lots of ways to be involved. We also have an education platform called Zibby Classes. The classes can be sponsored, and then we can produce custom advertising packages. I know that might require you working with someone else in your company to do it together, which is maybe a pain, but anyway, for the end user, I think it's a great experience to be able to do all of that. Anya Kaplan is here today and can take all your questions, and I'll be here after. But basically, if you advertise on my show, you're reaching a really smart, educated, warm, excited community that is really open to influence and suggestions, from someone they trust, which happens to be me. So I hope that you will listen. You might not have time to read books, but you do have 30 minutes sometimes to learn about an author. And I really believe that once you get to know more about the author, you'll be much more likely to buy their book. And at least you'll sound like you know what you're talking about. So if you get a minute, have a listen to the podcast. Listen to my ads, which by the way go far longer than 60 seconds. So they're like 3 minutes each. I'm like, I don't even care. I'm just gonna tell you about my kids making the kiwi crate yesterday and how fun that was. So anyway, thank you for listening. This is such a dream to be up on the stage after 5 years of this podcast. So thank you very much and enjoy.